November 19th, and this is the City of Los Angeles Audits Committee. And joining me are my colleagues, Mr. Blumenfield and Mr. Parks. Thank you for being here. We can get started. Madam Clerk, I'd like to take up item 1 through 5 together. Could you please read the item into the record?
For items 1 through 5, what you have before you is communication from the mayor. This has to do with the appointment of Mr. Vincent D. Jones, Mr. Todd Sargent, Mr. Joseph Demento, and Mr. Jerry Levy, and Ms. Susan Burks to the Quality and Productivity Commission. This particular item does have a time limit, which the last day for council to act is December 13. And the clerk did receive the ethics review after the agenda was released, and copies have been provided.
All right, thank you very much. I had an opportunity to meet with our appointees about 10 minutes ago. Great to meet all of you. I know some of you from our previous work. We can just welcome you and have you all speak a little bit about yourselves and why you're interested in this committee, and then my colleagues can, of course, entertain any questions. So we can start off with you.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Joe Demento. I live in the Mid-Wilshire area. I grew up in Orange County, but then had the sense to relocate to Los Angeles. I currently work in management consulting on the private sector, and I, since moving to LA about 2 years ago, have just fallen in love with the city and would love to bring some of my background from the private sector to the public sphere and help improve the lives of Angelinos by improving city services for them. So thank you so much for having me here, and I look forward to helping out.
Good afternoon. Good to see you all. Thank you for having me today. My name is Vincent Jones. I'm a resident of Westwood. I was born in Compton, raised in Inglewood, and a longtime Angelino. And I'm interested in this commission because I worked for government in many ways over my career, and now I'm running a consulting firm that works primarily with foundations and nonprofits to find ways to leverage public-private partnerships around policy changes. And a big part of what makes those work is the effective partnerships with city employees and state employees and government employees. And with this commission, love to be able to find ways to strengthen those types of partnerships, and also to find ways to save some money and to help the city get back to basics.
Hi, I'm Todd Sargent from Mount Washington, so in CD1. I've been a management consultant for about 14 years now, primarily in IT consulting, so working around system quality and improvement, as well as the organizational adoption and training and communications of services and goods for some clients. So I'm a previous commissioner through the Industrial Development Authority, so I had some experience working around the city and city services, so I have some ideas, I guess, how this commission can move forward and be even more engaged in improving city services to our constituents.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Bursk. I run a Chamber of Commerce on the west side. I was born and raised in Los Angeles in a 5-mile radius. I know the area well. I've done many different things, from having 2 businesses that were successful to working in the community, being involved with charter reform when it came about, being appointed to the West LA Planning Commission at the time, and also being district director and chief field deputy for a council member Weiss when he was in office. For the last 8 years, as I say, I've run a Chamber of Commerce, and I think everything that I have done would be helpful in finding ways to reduce expenses and increase revenues and do more public service and give back to the community. So it's an opportunity I really would welcome and privilege to be part of.
Council members, my name is Jerry Levy, and I run a consulting firm that specializes in political strategy and healthcare are the predominant areas. My background is I grew up here in Los Angeles and live in an area in West Los Angeles. My goal is very simple. When I was approached about the commission, I feel that the viability of making the city operate more efficiently and productively is something that we have to look at much more definitively now than I think we've ever done before. I've interacted with a number of legislators from local into Washington for a number of years. In my healthcare business, We've evaluated how healthcare is delivered and financed, working with hospitals and healthcare systems. And I think that's how I evolved in the political process, because a number of groups that we worked with, including labor unions, evolved into ways that you could see very clearly that there were opportunities within the city to be much more specific in how money could be saved, how you could essentially look at making not only the departments more productive, but how the city was interacting on the county, state, and national level in respect to building Los Angeles to what I've always felt it should be. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Either of you have any questions?
Yeah, I just have a couple. I've watched this commission for about 10 years, and I just need to know if you really know what you're getting into. Because one of the things that I've seen every commissioner create a frustration for themselves is that they say, I have all these wonderful ideas, and then they go to the first meeting and they find that there's no staff. You're too busy yourself to go do the audits, and how do I do all the things that I have in mind under those conditions?
Well,
Other than that, that's my only question.
I guess I'll start off by saying, as I had said to Nuri, I met with Ron Galpern last night to talk about a closer alliance with the Controller's Office, even though they're limited in their staffing as well, not only to conduct audits, which is limited in that respect as well. What did you say, there were 6 auditors that we have now from the Controller's Office? To look at how we implement changes. But as you put it, Murni, I think that on a productivity level, you got to be very, I think at this point, very positive in how you move forward on the level of how you're going to effectively resolve issues as you determine that they need to be resolved pragmatically. So unlike finding something and coming up with a conclusion and not being able to implement it, I think I see this commission being much more proactive in the ability to do it with the limited staff, but I think working closer with the controller will facilitate more opportunity, I think, than we've had in the past.
I would say, I run a nonprofit where, there's very limited staffing. And I've worked on campaigns, there's very limited staffing and resources, and you have to get creative to be able to achieve the goals that you have to make the communities better. And the work that I do now, there have been many examples of like I said, public-private partnerships where you try to make sure that what you're prioritizing is not just my idea, but it's an idea that is shared by many people. We can be able to get some buy-in to find some creative ways to be able to either to get an audit and then to make sure it gets implemented after the findings come to light. So I think there's some, and I've also been involved in a lot of organizing efforts that have used creative ways to engage a wide variety of people to be able to do some fact finding and digging. And I believe in this. I don't know if that is within the scope of possibility in this situation. But I'd love to find out, to be able to find ways to engage more regular people in finding out how their government can work better.
If I can, I work with clients every day that understand where their problems are. They just don't know how to solve those problems. So the way I look at it is these audits need some sort of a vetting before they go to council to determine if they're even actionable. And if so, how? And what powers the council has to enact those changes in order to really improve city services in a material way. Right now, the commission, as I see it, doesn't have that sort of proactive stance at all. They're looking, hearing, nodding, saying that sounds like a good audit, but that doesn't do anything, and we need to be able to think about ways to do things. And so I know I'd be fired if I worked with a client and said, well, you've got all these problems, but I'm not sure how to solve them. And I think that with a good selection of folks on that board of 15, you'll have different experiences at the table to be able to take those challenges and the lines that say fix this, fix that, and really figure out how to operationalize it, figure out what city departments can do X, Y, or Z, or what council members can move forward in their districts to do X, Y, or Z. But I think that there's an expectation that this city has some challenges, has some problems that need to be addressed. And this is a great commission, I think, to sort of vet those challenges and figure out what are, prioritize them, which are the ones that we have time, resources, et cetera, to support, and then move forward on them. So I think of it as almost like your arms and legs of figuring out how these audits really work in detail and providing you with guidance on how or taking the guidance from the council, but also providing you with recommendations on how to move forward on these audits. Having so many audits in arrears, for example, that have been done and not reviewed and not closed out, when you told us that earlier, I was shocked. Someone should have been fired for that too.
He was.
Good. Oh, wait a minute. I just know what you meant.
Hopefully none of us will, but we're going to work on that.
We got your back, Nuri.
But the thing is, I would just ask you, it's going to be a long haul.
Yeah.
You have a lot of history to look at, and what's happened in my tenure is that the award ceremony became the staple.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is that if you're, audits and material, the key is going to be how do you delve into that? How do you get the information? How do you deal with that once you get it? Because you're not going to find a bunch of people showing up and saying, here's 42 ideas. The issue is, and then if you've not dealt with general managers in the city, it's not an easy task to wander into their offices and say, tell me about your problem.
Right.
And so these are things I think you have to kind of think about and how you're going to come about, because the frustration, we've all seen smiling and shiny faces on each group of commissioners, but somewhere they hit the wall and they realize the reality is they don't have the time to leave their employment to go do this stuff, and they look around and they say, James, take a note, and they find out there is no James. And so these are things that I think you have to look at and see how you're going to use the body of 15 and the collective wisdom of 15 to actually get to the product of the productivity that you may be looking for. That's my only suggestion.
I think one of the things that Vincent said, when you run a nonprofit, you're problem solving all the time, and you don't have a staff of 10, 15, or 20. A lot of times you only have a staff of 2 or 3, and it's amazing what you can do if you know how to problem solve, if you know what you're looking for. You can identify what some of those issues are. I think we have that opportunity to do that, especially with the background that all of us have. So I think we might surprise you.
Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Blumenfeld, do you have a question?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say, looked at all of your backgrounds. You've all got great, impressive backgrounds. I'm excited about all of you moving forward. Some of you have known a long time. Vincent, Jerry, some of you, my staff, have known a long time. Some of you just getting to know. But I'm optimistic about the future for all of you on this commission. And sort of within the context of what my colleague asked, I guess I put it out there maybe to have each of you say what you if you can think of a concrete goal that you have for your time on the commission, maybe just not a long thing, but just tell us what you think that goal might be, and then we'll informally, after you're done with your commission, I may ask you again, did you achieve that goal? And so just keep that in mind. Maybe just go through each of you if you have one. If you don't, that's fine too. But I think that's useful both for yourself and for us to sort of think about how we measure productivity of our own time on the commission. So I don't know who wants to start.
Thank you. I'll start. I think one of my primary goals is ensuring that Angelinos are aware of how their city can serve them and improving the perception of city services for average Angelinos. So whether that is through outreach efforts, encouraging people to be in contact with City Hall more often if they have a need that can be served by city services, or just improving the speed and quality of the service that they're given by various city departments, and having a measurable uptick in that in their perception of the city working for them. I think that's really what I'd be focused on primarily.
Well, from my standpoint, Bob, I think that the answer is trying to look at the departments, how they function, where there may be holes, how those holes can be fixed, getting a more direct, pragmatic relationship with some of these general managers, relating to, as you said, trying to pull out where the problems are, and if this commission can come up with conclusions to make them work more effectively and certainly more efficiently. Because I think that as we discussed, you were talking about old audits. I think the problem is in the past, and not relating to this commission, but a number of situations have cropped up. People see them, look at the problem, decide they're going to work on it, and then as you put it, it never gets done. So I think my goal is to try to look at how we can streamline these departments and make them run more effectively.
I'll be pretty specific, and it's probably too bold, and don't ask me when I'm done because it might not be done. But the building process here in the city, the previous mayor commissioned a study initially on what could be done potentially to synergize some of the efforts that are done across city agencies that are involved in the building process. I think you're all very familiar with that. Died a slow death, I think largely because this different departmental managers didn't see the value of working together, of reducing the silos between these different organizations and truly bringing efficiency and quality to the process. I've heard anecdotally, I actually went to an RFP session for that group, and I heard from the Gartner researchers that did the initial study that this is turning large businesses away from working in the city of Los Angeles. It's turning small contractors away from working in the city of Los Angeles. If they need to build I mentioned earlier, a fence in someone's backyard, they have to go through the same process, maybe 7, 8 city agencies, in a very, very time-intensive, labor-intensive, paper-driven process. And that's ridiculous that a city of this size needs to have that sort of a convoluted process around building. So in my perspective, that's where I'd like to focus, because I think it'll make lives a lot easier for quite a few different sectors of our constituency.
I agree with that as well. I think simplifying the process, I think permitting has been it's so encumbered with so many problems, development, getting things through the process. And I think communication between departments has been lacking for a very, very long period of time. And I think you need to build those relationships with the general managers, and not going in and reorganizing departments. That's not really what our job is, but to try and make it work more efficiently for them and to communicate better.
But for me, like I said before, I have a community organizing background, and I've worked at a foundation that supports organizing. And I think that far too often people feel like government happens to them, and they're never really, and they will have critiques, but don't really have opportunities to be a part of solutions. And so I think if there's a way to be able to engage a broader swath of the public in identifying some of their problems and digging deep so they understand themselves and be part of the solution, I think that would be very powerful. And I think to try to figure out ways to create, I know this is important to Councilmember Bloomfield, a culture of innovation within city government, so that this is Los Angeles. It was a pioneer town. From the and we should be our city government should be have elements and things that are encouraging city government, city workers, and to just be innovative and think about how to govern in new and creative ways. Those are my two things.
Well, thank you very much for accepting the challenge. And I very much look forward to what you said, Mr. Levy, in terms of working with Mr. Galperin's office and this committee and myself, not to only give you the tools, but to empower you as a commission and also begin to do the real work of this committee. Unfortunately, for now, we have to sort of go through some of the backlog that I explained to you, but we're going to get through that process. We're going to get through it, and we're going to do it together, and then we're going to move on and start working on some of the stuff that I like how specific you were, Todd, in terms of what things that we should be doing to expedite permitting and building in the city. How do we do it together? So if there aren't any objections, I'd like to move the appointments forward. I believe 3 of you are going to come before City Council tomorrow, or all 5?
3.
3, right? Okay. I don't know who they are, but...
The first 3, which will be Mr.
First 3,
Jones,
Joe,
Mr. Sargent, and Mr. Demento.
Okay. So with no further ado, I'd like to move that, and I'll see you folks tomorrow. And then the rest will come later, Madam Clerk?
We're waiting for the council president to let us know.
Okay. I was hoping to take a few guys together, but that's okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Thank you.
much.
Okay.
Congratulations. Good to see you.
We will be talking soon.
Yes, I'll see you. Bye, Jerry. Bye-bye. I didn't ask if there were any cards, but I assume
There were no
weren't.
cards.
There were no cards. Okay, so Madam Clerk, can you read item 6 into the record, please?
For item 6 was before you is the Harbor Department's report. This has to do with the economic impact of the 28th World Ports Conference, which was hosted by the Port of Los Angeles.
A year ago. Right, this is,
Correct.
yeah, this has been a while.
May 5th through the 10th, actually this year.
Okay. Welcome.
Hello, council members. I'm Teresa Adams Lopez from the Port of Los Angeles, Director of Public Relations, and we're here to report back on the conference that was held this past May, on the 5th through the 10th. It was the 28th World Ports Conference of the International Association of Ports and Harbors. They are an international group of port entities around the world, several hundred strong. Every other year they hold this World Ports Conference. It's akin to bringing the Olympics to your port, is what they told us. And it was actually begun here in the city of Los Angeles in 1958. So this is the first time that it had come back to our city. We were the host. We had more than 500 attendees, representing 206 ports, and it was a very good conference. We had a really robust schedule of topics that were discussed, as well as opportunities to enjoy the city of Los Angeles as well for our guests. The conference cost in total $1.4 million. And we estimate the total economic value to the city was $4.1 million. That's about $2.6 million in direct spending from the conference itself and our delegates who flew in from around the world. We're happy to report 16% of those coming in reported extending their stay here in Los Angeles either before or after the conference.
Okay, well, according to what I read, this initiated. So initially, the $200,000 that sparked this motion was as a result of promoting the conference in South Korea last year.
Correct.
So this is how we got here.
Correct. And that's an IAPH tradition. The next host city for the next port host comes to the one prior and holds an evening reception for all the guests promoting their conference.
And that reception is what cost $200,000?
That was
Flying people there, hosting the reception.
right, hosting the reception. We also had a booth, at the exhibit area, and so it was expenses along those lines as well.
Do you have any questions? Or?
That was the issue that was prompted. So was the $200,000 an appropriate expense?
I can tell you that Hamburg has the conference after us. They spent $288,000.
Who
The Port of Hamburg. They have it in 2015, and their expense here was $288,000. That was just for the dinner, so I think we were in the ballpark.
Wow. It's quite a party.
How many people?
500?
So what does that work out to per person?
Now it's math. Now you're asking me to do math. Between 1 and 200, right? Yeah.
See, it's more than that. So, but let's see, the question is. So the other question I had was the
400. Excuse me, $400
yes,
for Hamburg's.
for Hamburg's, but less than that for ours. But
Right.
And that gets approved through. Is there a competitive process, or how does that mean? That's just the decision to do that is a discretionary one?
Well, actually, in this case, we created a nonprofit entity to handle the expenses, and we went through the authority to that through our board. The dinner itself was about $160,000, so we did have a competitive process. And in our board report setting up the entity, we did let them know how much those early expenses were going to be, and that was approved through the board.
How many countries participated in the conference? You said 206 ports?
206 ports.
This was held in May? Early May?
Correct, May 5th through 10th. I'm not sure of the number of countries, but it's one of the attachments. It's a lot of countries.
So when will we know if this actually generated more business for the port? How is that estimated, or who does that breakdown?
The folks who come to this conference are primarily other ports, so it's more about sharing what's going on in the industry with regard to environmental regulations, new technologies. It's more about information sharing than actually bringing business to the port.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In fact, in many instances, you're competing with each other.
Well, I would think so. 'Cause the vendors or shipping companies are not necessarily attending the conference, right? It's just, that's what I thought it was initially.
No, ports.
Right. It's other ports, and it's more information sharing, and then putting together standards worldwide, like our AMP, our plugging in initiative. That was one of the things that we started that's now gone global, and so it's a way for us to share that information.
How much is that the AMP been adopted by other ports? Is that pretty well universal now?
It's gathering steam. It's gathering steam.
The other thing I was wondering, on your economic impact,
Mhm.
when you look at it, it says 2.6 million direct spending and approximately 4.075 million on economic input. What does that mean in the sense that when you say direct, that's charging hotels and
Right.
car rentals? Now what's the economic input?
The economic value, it's a multiplier effect that is used by LA Inc., I forget what their new name is, that multiplies out what each delegate actually spends in the area themselves, not direct spending from the conference.
And so would this be relegated to City of LA primarily or exclusively? That's where the economic impact, or was it
Primarily.
spread wider than that?
It's primarily here in the city of Los Angeles. They were at the LA Live, the Marriott there, so they were central to Los Angeles, and as far as we know, they stayed here.
Okay. And then the other thing is that it appears through what sponsorships and donations, you were able to cover almost the cost of the convention.
Correct. We raised just about enough. The port only had to, we were a sponsor as well, and then cover just a little bit of the cost, about $250,000 outside of what we were able to raise.
Now, I don't know if it's proprietary, but what would be the primary sponsors? Is that the shipping companies?
Primarily, they were engineering companies. Samsung was a sponsor, AECom, those kind of companies who would do business with the ports.
Thank you.
Council members, David Libatique, Port of Los Angeles. In answer to in response to your question regarding whether or not this was a marketing conference for shippers, the IAPH is a body for ports around the world to actually gather and formulate policy. They have consultative status with the United Nations, and so they deal with international maritime issues and developing. So there was a good deal of business that was actually taking place between the members of IAPH dealing with how to deal with liquefied natural gas, passenger safety, other issues that collectively the ports then forward over to the United Nations. So there was a good deal of business that was done, but that's kind of the nature of what is done within these World Ports conferences.
Is terrorism a big issue?
Mainly issues of piracy and things that happen on the high seas, conventions around how to deal with ship emissions, things with the International Maritime Organization, and this is a group that also incubated the creation of the World Ports Climate Initiative, how to deal with carbon reduction on the high seas. So that's kind of the collective action that is generated by this conference is usually of that nature. It's not it's not a discussion about how to compete against one another in terms of establishing trade
Port
routes.
security would be a part of that.
Yes.
Was it held at the convention center, or where was it at? Where do you hold the
It was
conference?
at the JW Marriott at LA Live. Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you wish to notify?
Yes, and there are no cards, correct?
Correct.
Okay. With no objections, we'll note and file the report. That concludes our agenda for today. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.